So, Karen, I'm delighted to be here with Brad as well and to welcome you to Live at the Forum.
Well, it is good to see you guys. Thank you.
And Karen, I know that you don't need an introduction because everybody knows you and your wonderful system, but if you wouldn't mind, would you tell us, take just a couple of minutes to tell us about yourself and your region before we dive into some of the material?
Sure. So I'm Karin Norington-Reaves. I am the CEO of the Chicago Cook Workforce Partnership. We oversee the Workforce Board and the Workforce Innovation Region for the City of Chicago and Cook County. We are the largest such board of our type, a nonprofit organization that's spun out of city and county government in order to manage the system and leverage the federal dollars and access philanthropic funds.
Wonderful. Well, let's just get right to it, Karen. I'm excited today to talk about some key, or for Deb and I to talk about some key workforce issues with you. This is really such an unprecedented time in the world for so many different reasons, not just, we're thinking about how our industries and our communities are being impacted not only by COVID-19, but from the murder of George Floyd and the movement that we're really seeing across America. And I'd be curious, really, to start with, to get your thoughts and for you to tell us how your workforce system has really responded to this pandemic, maybe some of the lessons that you've learned out of it, and how your system is evolving and changing moving forward.
Yeah, so, there are twin pandemics in our country. There's COVID-19, and then there's the matter of racial injustice and, and civil unrest that has accompanied it. And, for us, it has been incredibly frustrating, frightening, sad, traumatizing, all of those things, right? And so, let me just speak to them for a moment. So clearly all of us have had to pivot to a virtual environment, which thank God we were prepared for from a technological standpoint. But I think for all of our workforce systems collectively, to have to move all of our services to a virtual environment, especially when we're facing serving folks who, number one, are themselves traumatized by all the events that are taking place, who themselves are out of work in greater numbers than ever before, and who may also be challenged with accessing us due to the inequities of broadband access. So that's one piece, and that in and of itself has been just a huge mammoth undertaking. Couple that with the racial inequities that COVID-19 has just laid bare. It's not that these things didn't exist, they've just been brought to the fore because of the pandemic. That is another layer of frustration. That's another layer of fear, another layer of concern. And then layer on to that the civil unrest that has unfolded. I've shared with folks that, on May 31st, the world turned on its ear, and on June 1st, I walked outside of my home to go check on one of our workforce centers and found that my own community was lacking grocery stores, banks, and gas stations overnight. And it was devastating. And, all of my staff, the vast majority of my staff, live in Black and brown communities throughout the city of Chicago. And we were all similarly impacted. All of the commercial districts in the city, from the south side, from downtown throughout the south side, and from downtown throughout the west side, were decimated. And so all of that coming together in the cauldron of unemployment is overwhelming. It's absolutely overwhelming, Brad.
It's not only overwhelming, it seems like, oh my God, it's almost impossible. Like, how can all of this be happening at one time?
Right. Well, and I'll tell you, I grew up in a household where I was not allowed to say the word can't. I literally was not allowed to say, I can't do it. My mother's philosophy was, you can do anything you set your mind to, even eat an elephant, as long as you do it one bite at a time. And so through that lens, as I think about the tasks that stand before us, we can do it. It's just going to be one bite at a time. And we have to recognize that bite is still getting us to the larger goal.
So Karin, I know there's so many issues we're trying to tackle at one time, and which in many ways too, I mean, the interesting thing about COVID-19 is everybody's listening in a sense, right? Everybody's kind of slowed down for a minute, and you have to wonder how much that's contributed to some people hearing that never heard before, not that there isn't a lot more listening to do.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm going to pivot just a little bit more. So I think those are all the issues, whether it's the pandemic, all of the unrest and working toward building greater equity. But what does the economic recovery look like as we move forward? In the midst of all that as well, how do we further all of those things as we look to recover economically?
Right. So, the economic recovery, I think, looks different in different communities, right? Because we all have different engines that are driving our local economies. So I'll speak just to Chicago because that's what I know best. We have 7 high growth, high demand sectors that we focus our time and energy on. And they're sort of standard. I mean, I think they would resonate with the average person. So there's manufacturing, healthcare, transportation, distribution, and logistics, affectionately known as TDL. Healthcare is a big sector here. Retail and hospitality and culinary, I'm going to save that for last. That's a big industry. Business and professional services, or B2B services. What we're seeing, and information technology. And so what we're seeing is that IT is a stable bet, right? So IT is not one that was really subject to the whims of the pandemic. And I think it's even more in demand now because we're all working from home and we're educating ourselves from home and we're purchasing our goods from home, right? Because it's not as safe to go into the grocery stores and such. And so TDL has become really, really important because it's how we're going to get our goods, right? And then you've got IT as a vehicle for that as well. Manufacturing, we've seen a lot of our plants retrofit and adapt to the times. So, everyone saw the great feel-good news story of the alcohol distillery that flipped and became a dispensary for hand sanitizer, right? And so people are really focused on this adaptability and this agility that allows you to pivot. And I think this is just the age of pivoting. I think if there's a term for this year, this is the year of the pivot. Like, you have just got to be able to be flexible enough to switch on a dime. The challenge for us in our local economy, however, when I look at hospitality, retail, culinary, some of those jobs are not going to come back, especially for the small and medium-sized businesses. And I think as we focus on economic recovery, we really have to figure out how do we support those small and medium-sized employers because they have been critical to making sure that our economies thrive and to making sure that people have employment. And so what are all the pieces that need to be put in place in order to make sure that they are able to continue to be employers and contributors to that local economy?
The year of the pivot. I love that. I actually just wrote that down. I'm going to have to incorporate and give you credit for that in some different things that I'm doing, but very interesting. I appreciate your thoughts on all of that. But I want to backtrack just a little bit. I want to digress to a couple of the things that you brought up when you were just talking about what the environment, the landscape looks like in general.
Yeah.
And really interested, since the murder of George Floyd, how you are seeing Chicago in general and maybe your workforce system really evolving and the steps that you're taking to advance initiatives around racial equality.
Yeah. So the murder of George Floyd, I think is going to be a watershed moment for this country. And the sad part is it's not like it hadn't happened before, right? It's just, I think, in the midst of a pandemic where people have been cooped up and are already stressed and depressed and anxious. And for it to be so incredibly blatant, as so many of the prior incidents have been, and for it to have been just so intensely broadcast and so callously done. I think it is just a flashpoint, and it's like, when is enough already, right? And so for us as an organization, we are a majority minority organization. 76% of our staff are Black, brown, Asian, and biracial. 80% of the people that we serve are Black and brown and Asian. And for us, I think we've had the comfort, for lack of a better phrase, of taking for granted that our work was about economic empowerment for Black and brown people, right? Because they're the majority of the folks that we serve. And so we have a lot of programs in place already, Brad, as you well know, that focus on creating career pathway opportunities for Black and brown folks on the south and west sides of Chicago. But what we had not been was blatant and explicit and direct about the fact that racial equity is a workforce development issue. It's just been a given as our work. And so this watershed moment in our country's history and everything that grew out of it in our city has created the opportunity for us to be crystal clear about the fact that racial equity is a workforce development issue, and it is an issue that is of great importance to us as an organization, and that it is something that we are going to be very vocal and very direct about. The other thing that has come up for us is broadband access and digital equity, and it is a subset of racial inequality, because what we see is that communities on the south and west sides of the city have really poor broadband access, and that impacts one's ability to apply for a job, to work remotely, and frankly, to get an education remotely, whether it's for your children or for adults who are doing career and professional development. So those both, digital equity and racial equity, are core issues that we are going to be very clear and very vocal about going forward.
Karin,
I'm so glad to hear that.
Karin, I love how you pointed out, you know, we do as an industry somewhat take for granted. We have diverse staff. We are very focused on these issues as an industry, but clearly not all industries are, not all businesses are. Where do you think the opportunity is for the workforce services industry, the workforce development industry, to better help businesses get farther along?
Yeah, and so, you know, a lot of the programs that we've created, so Shy Codes, which is our coding boot camp program, Construction Works, which is our skilled trades initiative in specifically around construction, those programs are very explicitly about diversifying the talent pipeline for employers in those industries. We have to do more of that. We just have to do more of that in terms of being direct and engaging with employers and having conversations that frankly may make some people uncomfortable. Well, damn it, look at what being comfortable has gotten us, right? Not very far. When you look at the reflection, at the overrepresentation of Black and brown folks in the service industry, which are high contact jobs with lower wages, where you are more likely to come in contact and contract this disease, and then because your wages are lower, you don't necessarily have access to health care, so you die, right? Like, this is what this has taught us. And so we have, as workforce development professionals and as folks who are providing direct care and service to folks at their lowest point, at their absolute lowest point, we have a responsibility not only to the people we serve, but quite frankly to these employers who in many instances want to do better but don't know how, right? We have a responsibility to shift paradigms. We have a responsibility to change mindsets, and we have a responsibility to assist them in diversifying their talent pool and helping them understand that there's untapped talent and potential everywhere, that they've got to move away from stereotypes and biases that they may not even be aware of, to make sure that we are creating access and opportunity for all.
Great, thank you. You know, I want to, go ahead, Brad. I was just going to comment, Karen, I participated in a conference about a year ago where there was a real aha moment for me, and this might sound really basic, but like what you talked about with your coding program, you know, artificial intelligence is everywhere, right? We're working, and when that is primarily a field made up of white workers, I mean, then all of these systems that are being, you know, programmed and the artificial intelligence being built in is geared toward, you know, understandably, because they taking it from their perspective. So the work you're doing with the coding program is really, really important and far-reaching when you can really make a difference in the diversity of that industry.
Yeah, and I think the other thing I just want to lift up is this is not about being anti-anybody. It really is about inclusion and growth and recognition of historic biases and intended and unintended barriers that prevent folks from having access to opportunity. Louise Hay is a now deceased metaphysics advocate, if you will, or leader. And she has this imagery in one of her books where she says, envision going to the shore and everybody is lined up with their bucket and everybody's scooping water out. But the person next to you is not taking any water from you by filling up their bucket. You all can fill up your bucket and walk away from the shore with whatever it is you need. And you're not taking anything away from anybody else. And I think if we could begin to see our economy as a space where it's not just a zero-sum game. In order for me to win doesn't mean you lose. It just means we both win. Like, why can't we all just win, right? And I think if we focus our work on ensuring that everybody is poised to win and that we've opened up pathways and opened up doors and made connections that allow everybody to win, it shifts everything. It shifts the dynamic. When it's always about I get and you don't, then it's a non-starter.
So my next and last question is kind of piecemealing from several different areas that we've talked about through over the past 10 or 15 minutes or so. You know, we've alluded to the fact that the pandemic really has, or many people say that the pandemic has accelerated us into the future. We've all kind of alluded to that through some of our comments. You even, Karen, alluded to the fact that the same can be said about, you know, the protests for racial equity and even the shifts in what demand industries and business processes look like. Like, this time has really kind of pent all of that up and we're really being thrust into the future. So if we think about it in terms of what an accelerated future looks like, can you give us your vision of what that accelerated future looks like for the Chicagoland area based upon what's happening right now in all of your communities?
You know, when you first said that, my head was spinning. I'm like, oh my gosh, how do I answer this? How do I answer this? And, you know, what popped into my head is the vision statement for my organization. So our vision is that every person has the skills they need to compete, and that every business has the talent it needs to compete in the global economy. That every person has the ability to thrive in a career of their choosing. So that's what the future state has to look like, and that's what we all have to be striving for.
Well, that's
awesome.
A wonderful way to kind of wrap this up as we're getting close to time. Deb, any follow-up questions?
Well, we still have a few minutes. So Karen, what else would you like to share with our audience about just kind of where your board is moving forward? I just attended your recent board meeting. I think it was last week. And so just some really great discussions. So maybe share with our audience just kind of where your board members are at on some of these issues.
Yeah, our board is awesome, as I'm sure you saw, Deb. And now I'm remembering, I do remember seeing your name on that Zoom room. Our board is just incredibly supportive, and they're maturing in terms of how they approach this work. So often we bring in private sector members who, you know, struggle to understand what it is we do and all the complexities that, you know, the funding, the rules, the regulations. But our board is really growing in their maturity, and as you saw, they are taking leadership in a very different way than ever before, and we're incredibly excited about that. And so I'm going to pivot for a moment, Deb. You know, one of the things that came up in our board discussion was around building the unrestricted dollars and really strengthening the organization from an operations standpoint. And you may recall that I said to them, you know, we've got irons in the fire. We've got these different applications pending. So I do want to announce that we actually just landed a $56 million contract to oversee the city's contact tracing work. And so we are absolutely
excellent. Oh my gosh, so exciting.
Yeah, so, and it's exciting to me because we're aligning public health and public workforce systems, and we are going to be able to impact the communities that have been most devastated by COVID-19. But it is because of our board's support, because they are constantly propelling us to be our best, because they believe in the work and because they believe in our team, that we're able to do things of that nature. And so, you know, I am truly grateful to sit in this seat and humbled by all that we do, and most importantly, humbled by the people that we serve. So thank you all for allowing me this opportunity to share.
I think it's wonderful. I'm so appreciative of you sharing your thoughts, your vision, and congratulations on your contact tracing opportunity. We as an organization also believe that that work clearly fits hand in glove with the workforce. I mean, the workforce development boards have they have all the partnerships into every single one of the zip codes of the communities. They know the people. I mean, leveraging that network that is in a workforce development area such as yours, I think is key to not only quickly and efficiently being able to connect with people, but get them to trust you, share the information, because you're already part of the community. So we as an organization think it fits naturally. I'm so glad to hear that you've landed that opportunity. I can't wait to talk with you more about what comes out of it and how it goes.
It's exciting. We brought in 4 other partners for training and for supporting the core and for you know, the articulation of career pathways beyond contact tracing, so that we can actually create an ecosystem where folks move into allied health occupations and move beyond contact tracing as an entry level, you know, sort of fresh start. So we're really, really thrilled. We've got great healthcare partners to move this forward. We're incredibly excited and humbled, like I said, to have been selected to be the lead agency. So
and
again,
what amazing job opportunities too, right? For the people of your community that I mean, it's such a great way to give back and do good and help the community that you live and reside in. So I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you.
Thank you
so much for joining us today. It's always great to see you. I wish it was in person, but hopefully before too long it will be. And again, Karin Norington-Reaves, the Chief Executive Officer for the Chicago-Cook County Workforce Partnership. We always appreciate your time, and I hope that you have a great forum.
Thank you, Brad. Who knew that you hanging out of a car in the middle of DC would turn into this?
Exactly. Thank you, Karin. Thanks for being
you all. Be well. Enjoy the forum.
You too. All right. You take care. Bye-bye.